Okay, well, today we are going to be talking about these two guys. The spirituality of Charles Fillmore and Albert Einstein. I like these guys. Charles is, of course, as you know, the co-founder of the Unity movement with his wife Myrtle. And Albert Einstein, of course, was a totally brilliant scientist and physicist. And how this all came together was, I was writing the article for the April newsletter, and I try to work on it a month ahead of time so Margie can get it edited and up on the website and so on and so forth. And I was doing it on March 14th, which just happened to be the birth date of Albert Einstein. And so I subscribed to this daily Almanac thing, and in honor of Einstein's birthday, they were sharing a quote. They were sharing this quote. This is where Einstein says, "I want to know how God created this world. I am not interested in this or that phenomenon, in the spectrum of this or that element. I want to know his thoughts. The rest are details." And I read that, and you know what I said? Me too. Huh? Anyone else? Anyone else look at that and think, yeah, I'd be interested. I'd be interested in knowing that. Yeah, a lot of people, especially atheists, try to claim Albert Einstein as one of their own, but he wasn't an atheist. It's just that he didn't have an image of God as some kind of a supernatural entity up in the sky. He was very much interested in the very same questions that philosophers and theologians have been wrestling with for centuries. So when I read that quote, all of a sudden something started to ring in the back of my mind, something that Charles Fillmore once said, and this is from the book Dynamics for Living. Charles gives his definition of mind with a capital M. He says, "By the term mind, we mean God, the universal principle which includes all principles. God is the original mind in which all real ideas exist. The mind of the universe is composed of archetype ideas, life, love, wisdom, substance, truth, power, peace, and so forth. The one original mind creates by thought. The science of truth is God thinking out creation." Man, that guy was pretty far ahead of his time, just like Albert. In fact, doesn't it sound like Charles and Albert were looking for the same thing? It's almost as if they were on the same spiritual path, even though their actual paths in life never crossed. They were contemporaries. I think Charles was about 25 years older than Albert Einstein, but they never met. And here you have Charles. I think Charles was a metaphysician who was a scientist at heart, and I think that Einstein was a scientist who was a philosopher or a metaphysician at heart. They had that going for them. Each, in their own unique way, gave us this new way of looking at the universe and everything in it, and especially our part in it. One of the great gifts that Albert Einstein gave us was proof that matter and energy are two forms of the same thing, of the same stuff. Energy is liberated matter, and physical objects can be seen as trapped energy. So, if you're ever feeling tired or run down or unworthy, think about this, okay? If you're an average-sized adult, the physical matter of your earthly body contains enough potential energy to explode with the force of 30 very large hydrogen bombs. Okay, I'm not making this up. Fortunately, our current level of technology isn't very good at liberating that energy. Everything has this kind of energy trapped in it, and I think it's a good thing that we're not that good at getting it out yet. But it certainly gives new meaning to what Jesus was saying when he said, "You are the light of the world." He wasn't kidding. When Charles Fillmore heard about Einstein's discoveries, he wrote this book called Atom-Smashing Power of Mind. Some of you may have had a chance to read it. He talks about the possibility that the miracle stories about Jesus in the New Testament might be explained by the fact that Jesus was so spiritually advanced that he had figured out a way to release the energy from the physical matter in his body or around him. Now, when I first read that, my first reaction was, well, gee, that's kind of out there, maybe a bit far-fetched, but I had to admire his spirit of adventure. Charles wasn't saying that that's definitely what actually happened for sure. He was suggesting the possibility, which is exactly what a good scientist does. They offer a possible explanation. They call it a hypothesis. They make observations. They follow the evidence. And often it leads to a dead end. And scientists are very used to that. It happens a lot. So maybe Charles' idea on this was kind of a dead end, but you know what? You're not going to know it until you're willing to take the journey, until you're willing to follow the evidence to wherever it leads you. You accept what you find there, and if it's a dead end, well, then you revise your hypothesis and you start over and over and sometimes over again, if need be. So while I'm verifying that first Einstein quote, and by the way, that's something you have to do. You see all these things on Facebook quoting Einstein, and boy, there's a lot of misattributions out there, so I kind of want to do some of my homework on this. So I was verifying the first Einstein quote, and of course what happens, I come across another one, which demonstrates that Charles and Albert were indeed kindred spirits. Now this is from Albert Einstein. He says, "A human being is a part of the whole called by us universe, a part limited in time and space. He experiences himself, his thoughts and feelings as something separated from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and to affection for a few persons nearest to us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty." Man, I'm telling you, Albert was a deeply spiritual man. You get that just by listening to his words. And he thought about these things, and while he's doing all these equations up there, this is what's informing it in the background. This is his motivation. This is what keeps him going. Same thing for Charles. While he's delving into these deep ideas of philosophy and theology, he's trying to figure out a scientific way to prove that these things are true. I love science. I'm a science geek. I think I've told you that before. In fact, I ended up going to law school because I wasn't good enough at math to get into a physics class or medical school or those kind of things. But I really admire this approach and the way that they blend together so well. And I love that phrase that Einstein uses, the optical delusion of consciousness. Now Charles would call that error thinking. That was Charles' interpretation of the misused and abused word sin, error thinking. You've heard the old saying, the wages of sin is death. Well, for Charles and Albert, the wages of sin is separation, a state of consciousness where we settle for less, where we settle for a small life limited to our self-centered desires, our narrow human perspective. And there's nothing wrong with our human perspective because the body is finite. It's going to wear out someday. And even though we're all a part of this greater wholeness, we're not interchangeable. There was a Zen teacher that I knew once, and he liked to say, he'd say, "We're all one, but I'm not you and you're not me." And that's just a fact. That's one of those paradoxes that we have to live with. So as long as we're alive, we're going to be experiencing this vast universe through this filter of our human perspective. But that doesn't have to be an absolute boundary. And it definitely doesn't have to be a barrier. As we can see, both Charles and Albert believed that it's possible to free ourselves from that prison of our limited perspective, to free ourselves from that self-imposed prison of settling for less than our full magnificence. It's possible to free ourselves from this prison and have a first-hand experience of mind, universe, God, principle, whatever label you want to apply. Whatever we want to call that principle that formed all matter, all energy, and empowered everything to be. And incidentally, that's probably the best definition of a mystic that you're likely to hear. A mystic is anyone who believes that it's possible to have a first-hand experience of God as mind with a capital M, and then tries to do it. So the fact is, I'm not you, you're not me, but when we talk about oneness, we're talking about another fact, another absolute truth, which is that the same energy and the same principles that gave rise to the Big Bang and ignited the stars and holds them in their orbits is the totality of what I am and what you are. We're different forms of the same thing. Different forms of the same stuff. So what we're really up to as mystics is we're trying to experience this one thing that expresses in all of these different forms. Now, the technical name that we use for this in unity is individuality. I don't like to throw around a lot of jargon, but you may come across that sometime in your readings. We call that individuality. It's basic unity metaphysics. And I want to draw on the writing of Eric Butterworth, who had a real gift for being able to reinterpret and revitalize some of Charles Fillmore's work. He wrote this great book that a lot of you are familiar with called Discover the Power Within You. And so this is how he explains individuality. He says that we live and move and have our being in an infinite ocean of intelligence and life and substance. And we are a wave within that ocean in which intelligence and life and substance are projected into livingness as the person we are. When we become aware of this unity, we are transformed from personality to individuality. So that individuality is the essence of who we are, and somewhere along the line we overlay this thing called personality on top of it. And we see that ocean and wave analogy again. And he uses it because it works so well. Just imagine, you're sitting out in the midst of the ocean. Can't see any land. Everywhere you look, just water. The ocean is all that there is. It is the entirety of our experience. And then you start to notice waves that are moving on the surface of the water. And as we watch, we can see that, well, you know, each wave is separate. They come and go at different times. Some are short, some are tall, different shapes, some last longer than others. The one thing that they all have in common is they rise from the surface, they grow larger, they move, and then ultimately they disappear back into the vast ocean. Each wave is different, and yet each wave is made up of exactly the same substance as any other wave. Take one wave, test the water, look at it under a microscope or whatever else you want to do, and you're going to know exactly what every single other wave is made up of. The only thing different is the temporary, superficial appearance. Now, when the wave disappears, is any part of that substance gone? Nope. The only difference between the ocean and the wave is this matter of perspective. Or we might say that the wave is having an experience that's maybe just slightly different from the ocean and the other waves. So, the vast ocean continues to express as waves. The ocean expressing as a wave. That's what a wave is. And we can say the same thing about our consciousness or sense of being. Divine mind is the ocean. We're individual waves in that ocean, and when our existence as this particular wave or individuality is over, where do we go? Onward. Onward is the ocean of consciousness, call it mind. In a sense, we really don't go anywhere, just like the wave really hasn't gone anywhere. And if we keep following this analogy, when one wave gives way to another, nothing's really lost, is it? At least when we look at it objectively like that. Because one of the things that differentiates human beings from waves is that waves don't have memories and feelings and things like that, at least as far as we can tell. A wave isn't aware of the fact that its perspective is going to change. The wave can't even enjoy the unique experience of having that wave experience. That's a big difference between human beings and a wave when we use this analogy, because what happens to us, because we can think and learn things, is we grow up being taught that there's no ocean. There's just the waves. In a sense, we forget about the ocean because we're so fixated on the experience of being this wave. And then the next thing you know, we're making fun of the other waves. We're judging. We're admiring how much larger we are than the other waves, how much more righteous and moral and powerful. Wait and see what I'm going to do to that surfer over there. You know what I'm saying? That's the kind of thing that human beings overlay onto that experience of individuality. We overlay it on that experience of being an ocean. We forget about individuality, we forget about an ocean, we become the wave, and we think that's all there is, and that's what Eric was getting at when he talked about personality. It's all the stuff that we lay on top of it so that we limit our experience, we forget who we are, and it gets to the point where we simply deny that there's anything more than the human perspective, the wave-like experience. That's what Einstein was calling the optical delusion of consciousness. We like to gather up our personal preferences, our likes, our dislikes, our memories, our feelings, all that kind of stuff. We put them in a great big bag and we put a label on it that says me, right? And then, like this picture here, we haul this big bag around with us and it becomes a massive burden. We don't realize it, but hey, we loaded the sucker up. We're the ones who identify with it. We're carrying it, and it creates a prison for us. So, I want to take two of the quotes and I want to combine them now. Einstein and Eric. When you put them together, you get this. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty. When we become aware of this unity, we are transformed from personality back into individuality. That's the insight we get when we combine the two. And it starts with awareness, when we become aware of this unity. Whenever we exclude others from our circle of caring and compassion, for any reason, we are building up personality. We're reinforcing the walls of our self-made prison. We're obscuring our individuality, our true self. We are creating the optical delusion of consciousness. The way around that is through self-observation. Becoming aware of when personality is running the show. Now, there are spiritual practices like prayer and meditation that can enhance our ability to do this, but ultimately it comes down to mindfulness. Mindfulness is something, as Karen was leading us in the meditation earlier, it's something that we can do anytime, anywhere. So don't wait until you feel that you are an accomplished meditator to go out and practice mindfulness by becoming aware moment by moment of exactly what is unfolding in our thoughts. And ask the simple question, Where am I coming from? Is personality in charge? Am I limiting myself? Am I limiting the way that I view this relationship? Or am I allowing individuality to widen my circle of care and compassion? Mindfulness kind of takes on a new meaning when we think of Charles' definition of mind as all that there is. Mindfulness, to be fully aware of our individuality. We'll pick up with that topic next Sunday. Thank you.